Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Global City Global Library webinar. My name is Kimberly Brown-Harden, and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the host and question moderator today. Our presenters this morning are Jessica Moore, Immigrant Program Specialist of the Indianapolis Public Library, and Mary Agnes Hilton, Manager of the Eagle Branch, also of the Indianapolis Public Library. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. This webinar is part of our Library Trends and Hot Topics series. To register for other webinars available for this theme or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. The State Library has many ways we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about the Indiana State Collection, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If you do have a question, type it into the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. I'll be watching and will get your question to Jessica and Mary Agnes as soon as there's a good opportunity. There should also be time near the end for questions. The session is 1 hour, so you will get one LEU for today. After the webinar, please download the LEU. Click on the link, press download. You can then print it out and sign your name. Also notice in the chat box there is a link to today's survey. Please take a brief survey about this webinar. It helps us to offer more trainings. If at any point during the webinar you experience any sound issues, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left side of the screen. If there is a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat pod. If you are unable to resolve the sound issues you are experiencing, we are recording the meeting and you can watch it offline after the meeting has ended. Again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. I will now turn the mic over to Jessica and Mary Agnes. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Kim, and good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jessica Moore, and I'm the Immigrant Program Specialist with the Indianapolis Public Library. Mary Agnes and I are very happy to be here this morning.
Hi, everyone.
We're grateful for the opportunity to talk about the role of many libraries has shifted and how communities serving immigrant and refugee populations has become a growing priority, including for our library. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about our library specifically, some of our new initiatives, but also talking about some best practices that were learned from the Cologne Public Library through an exchange program that Mary Agnes participated in. As a starting point, we thought it would be really important to talk about kind of why our library has taken this approach. And a lot of it has to do directly with the shifting demographics of our community. So in 2015, the Brookings Institute wrote a report that named Indianapolis as a minor emerging gateway for new immigrant communities. And so I believe around 2014, it was estimated that Indianapolis, along with several other cities, made up about 11% of the foreign-born population growth in 2014. Now, while 11% doesn't seem like a large number, for a city like Indianapolis that's not a traditional location for immigrant refugee communities, it's a significant jump. And we know that many service providers and other institutions like the library, schools, the legal system also started to see these same trends. So by 2025, Indianapolis is projected to be a minority-majority city. And we know that that is largely due to the growth of our immigrant communities. And according to the last census, it was suggested that the growth of our city was actually, in fact, due to the foreign-born or immigrant populations in Indianapolis. As it stands, the infographic you see here is thanks to our friends at the Immigrant Welcome Center. As it stands, there are about 120 or so nationalities represented in the city. And in the top right corner there, you'll see that our top 5 countries of origin for Hoosier immigrants range between these 5. And we can actually, if we were to add a 6th, Germany would also be very close to the top because of businesses and expatriates who come to work here in Indianapolis. So what you see here is actually information on the foreign-born population for the Eagle branch, where Mary Agnes is the manager. And according to the American Community Survey, this information was actually pulled together by Census Tract for a team that we have at Central Library. And they have about a 17% foreign-born population, largely from Latin American countries, which is no surprise. But what they're beginning to see in this particular community is increasing populations of West African communities and also individuals from Asia. And so you'll see Burma, you'll see Thailand, but Nepal is also one of the countries where there has been significant growth, and the Eagle branch has started to see some of those populations as well. So as we think about how do we move forward through serving our communities, how do we do that effectively, what was really important to us is that we kind of set the foundation for some of that work. And so we have been kind of functioning from 3 building blocks. First, do we understand the economic, the cultural, and the social impact of diversity on our community? Again, like the library, institutions around our city have been impacted by the growth of the immigrant and refugee communities. Secondly, how do we create organizational openness and an enthusiasm for diversity? So you have to have staff that are willing to engage and who are interested in diving into this. And so having internal supports across the system, across departments, was really a key factor in terms of being able to do this work effectively. And then also, for us, cultivating relationships that are strategic and that are intentional have been really key. How do we work and partner with nonprofit organizations, with businesses, with social service organizations, and even with schools? And schools, I feel like, have been significant partners for us in terms of being able to reach and connect to communities in Indianapolis. So along with the relationship piece, our ability to build relationships is really based on our ability to engage. And so we've tried to do that 3 different ways. How do we celebrate our communities? Doing this with the support and the feedback from the communities that are represented in Indianapolis. How do we serve those communities best? What library resources or resources do we have available through outreach or through programs that are of interest to those, to our global community? And then thirdly, how do we collaborate? And what types of partnerships are we developing, again, with the schools, social service agencies, some of our ethnic community organizations, and then finally with our sister city committees. And our sister city committees have turned out to be really significant partnerships for us at the library. And we're going to use this as a transition point to Mary Agnes, who's going to give you some perspective into her exchange trip to Cologne, Germany, and the Cologne Public Library.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be joining you in this conversation this morning about a very important topic that is reaching out to immigrant and refugee populations in our communities and determining how to best serve them through our library's programs and services. Before I get started with the sister cities, I'd like to give you a little bit of background about my experience. I've been manager of the Eagle Branch Library, which is located on the west side of Indianapolis near the intersection of 34th Street and Georgetown Road. And that's approximately a mile north of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for any race fans that are out there. I've been employed with the public library for over 30 years, and 18 of those years have been at Eagle in 2 different capacities. First as adult services librarian from 1989 to 1997, From there, I transferred to the Pike branch, where I served as assistant manager until 2005, returning again to Eagle to serve as branch manager when I observed the demographic changes that had impacted the community since my departure. For the past several years, our staff have been working on how to best reach out into the community, given our limited staff capacity. How can we tell everybody the good news about what the library has to offer, especially trying to target those who may not be familiar with the concept of libraries or even have knowledge of the English language, let alone knowing how to speak it and understanding their life in their new home. We strive to help bridge that gap in the most welcoming way possible. One example is kind of small, but it's important, and we make our monthly branch program calendars available in 3 languages, that's English, French, and Spanish. Those are available both in print and electronic format. We distribute them to schools and other community contacts in the community. Now back to the sister cities. The Indianapolis Sister Cities program promotes international awareness and understanding through cultural, educational, civic, and business engagement. The exchange with these partner cities provides an opportunity to empower private citizens, municipal officials, and community leaders to serve as citizen ambassadors abroad. There are a total of 8 Indianapolis Sister City relationships, and we have enjoyed the longest one with Cologne, Germany, a relationship which began back in 1988, so it's nearly 30 years old. To borrow from former Indianapolis Mayor Greg Ballard, the chief objectives of the exchange program are, quote, to strengthen international partnerships and to create opportunities that make Indianapolis a globally recognized, inclusive city. IndyPL is proud to participate in these library staff exchanges, and where participants serve as ambassadors for both city and library to our counterparts around the globe. In order to be considered for participation in this exchange, interested individuals need to complete an application stating why they believe that they are the most qualified to serve as an ambassador, and then demonstrate that with supporting evidence. The goal of the first IndyPL Cologne exchange was more general in scope. Basically, it was to go over and observe the Cologne Public Library as a public institution, its relationship to the city of Cologne, to understand its role in the community and how it fulfills that role, to observe best practices, and then return home to share them with suggestions of how we might possibly implement them on this end. However, the goal for this exchange was a little bit more narrow in scope, to engage in a conversation about IndyPL's service to its immigrant and refugee populations. As you're well aware, in 2015, over 1 million refugees flooded Germany seeking asylum. Their arrival impacted the city of Cologne in ways that it was unprepared for, and consequently found itself scrambling to figure out how they can best meet the needs of these newcomers in the community. How can they help them transition to society, to German society, in the best way possible? And most importantly, how can the library help? Now, in order for an exchange to be successful, it requires collaboration between the sister city committees of both sponsoring cities. In Indianapolis, for example, my experience with them is I attended their monthly meetings in the months leading up to my departure. I got acquainted with the committee members, and they gave me guidance in return in terms of what to see and what to do once I got there, and also defined their expectations for my experience while I was over there. They also helped assist with travel arrangements in terms of plane reservations. In Cologne, the Sister City Committee participated in kind by providing accommodations for me in the home of one of their members, which afforded me a great opportunity to really become fully embedded in German daily life, where I enjoyed home-cooked meals and kitties to enjoy and lavish my love upon, because I'm a kitty lover. In fact, that was one of the cautionary points for anybody who was interested in applying for this particular exchange, because Alice, who was hosting us in her home, did have 2 cats, and just wanted to make everybody aware that that was something they should consider. The Sister City Committee in Cologne also provided me with 2-week passes for city transportation by bus and rail. They hosted a get acquainted / farewell dinner at a nice restaurant for me the evening before the last day of the exchange. And the reason I say both is because it was a chance for me to finally meet everybody on the Sister City Committee in Cologne, which was really an honor. And also, they were under the impression the exchange was going to last longer, probably 3 weeks, which is what the initial one had been. But when Nicole had gotten together and developed the itinerary, and after her experience, she believed that 2 weeks was actually a lot a lot better in terms of the experience. Also was provided with a walking tour of the city of Cologne, complete with stops at bakeries along the way, and they really do love their coffee and pastries over there. So that was a special treat. Nicole James also was the first IndyPL and Cologne exchange participant, and she was instrumental in preparing the itinerary from my experience. The exchange lasted for 2 weeks, from September 26th through October 7th of 2016. It was composed of meetings with the director, with the branch managers. I had the privilege of attending an all-staff meeting, and off the cuff was asked to introduce myself and to say a few words about myself. So leaning on my very few words of German that I had recently learned, I was able to actually get through the introduction, and all the smiling and welcoming faces made it very easy. So it was an experience, and when I look back at some of the views of that, I actually looked like I was very comfortable with it all, and they made me feel very welcome and a part of their staff. Also direct observations of daily library operations. Because I was not fluent in German, I couldn't really work the information desks, but I was able to observe patron transactions and take copious notes, because I knew I'd be needing to remember all of this when I returned. The very first day of my exchange, I gave a presentation on IndyPL services to immigrants and refugees to the library branch managers. They were all very interested and especially impressed by the degree of outreach that our library system is able to achieve. They don't have the staff capacity to make that happen, and I think sometimes when you're engaged in it every day, you don't think about that other libraries may not have that capacity. So we are very grateful that we are able to make that happen. We also toured 4 branches that were located in high immigrant density areas and able to see how the immigrants there in the community use the library. A lot of the students came to the library to do their homework, mostly because probably where they lived, it may have been a little bit crowded or noisy, not conducive to studying and doing their homework, so they sought the environment of the library. And there were also homework help sessions that were led by volunteers that were held twice weekly. And of course, can't have all work and no play, so there was definitely some downtime in the after hours on evenings on weekends for me to do some sightseeing. Alice, my hostess, invited me to an opera, and she has season tickets too, so that was interesting, an opera in German it was an opera that was in French with German subtitles, so I did the best I could. Also, her birthday celebration, she included me in, so I met many of her friends, and also, as I said, after work and weekends. There's a picture of, on the left is the director of the Cologne Public Library, Anna Vogt, and of course yours truly in the middle, and Nicole James, who was manager of the Salz branch over there and who helped me. She was fluent in German and so served as my personal translator every step of the way. Now, the Cologne Public Library, I want to say a little bit about it first before I launch into more information, but this is a picture of their central library, which was built in 1974. They are leading the way in Europe as far as their services to just their library services in general, because they are experiencing increases in their visits and usage of their library, which is in direct contrast to other trends in Europe at this time. 2010, 350 libraries closed in the UK, resulting in 8,000 job losses. And that was a time when I think a lot of libraries, including IndyPL, were going through some dramatic financial cuts and having issues and having to make staff cuts and budget cuts. So we understand that, but they have been able to, in fact, the number of their branches was cut. I believe they had 22, now they have 11 branches in addition to their central library. Each branch has just 4 staff members, but they are small facilities because they are city-run and they're usually in city centers, so they are not large in terms of space, but they still have a lot to do. Germany visitor count grew by 5 million between 2013 and 2015, and German libraries in general are adapting into dynamic spaces. They focus on community engagement as well as printed matter as ways to reach out and help refugees. And speaking of dynamic spaces, I think there's no better example than this place here, which was called the Sprachraum, translates as the language place or the conversation place. And this is, let me see. see. Talk a little bit about how it was conceived back in 2015. The director, Hannah Vogt, was beginning to hear all kinds of questions from many residents, and this was before the wave of refugees that came later in that year. She was getting questions from many who were seeking language instruction in German, and where can I find, do you offer these classes at the library? Do you have any additional space that, that provides this kind of instruction? And they didn't at the time. But one day when she was looking around, she noticed across the courtyard from the Central Library was this abandoned room. And it was just across from Central Library's main entrance. This idea came to mind, well, how about if we used that? Maybe that could be our dedicated space that we could use to help provide some instructions and assistance for the refugees. So she pitched the idea to City Hall, who immediately approved it, and that alone is quite a wonder, I believe, to be able to move through something that quickly anytime in terms of government. But they were very supportive of it because they were currently paying rent on it, and I think they were eager to see this being used for a very productive purpose. So they met with success, and in 4 months they were able to finalize details and get furniture for the center. It was now been open a little bit over 18 months and is going strong. The funding that they use comes from a 3-year grant that has been secured by the library, and it's used for language learning materials, literacy computers, learning games, what have you. And they have whiteboards, all kinds of supplies that you would have for a kind of a community space. Today, the Sprachraum counts the Red Cross as one of its key partners, as well as several private initiatives. What makes it successful and what keeps it going strong? Well, Sarah Dudek, Sprachraum coordinator, did not hesitate to shout out to all the volunteers that make the programs possible. It began with 2 German instructors had the idea to start a program, a language learning program there, and they soon were able to, they attracted 20 volunteers from the community, from all walks of life, and including migrants themselves now are actually volunteering and helping each other, whether it's with job assistance or helping each other with the language learning or just kind of sharing experiences. And they're able to bond that way and form new friends because they forged a deeper understanding. The number of volunteers over the past year has increased from 20 to over 50, and yet Sarah says that they still need some more backup because it's such a very busy place. They're constantly trying to evaluate the training that's necessary for volunteers and areas where they can improve. They're hoping to perhaps have more of a presence on social media. Moving forward, when you think of the Sprachraum, it in its own right signifies a role shift, whereas it becomes the byword for community engagement. It embodies community engagement. It can be, you could put an equal sign next to the word Sprachraum and say community engagement, because that is how it is so impressive to see so many people coming together in the community to help these people, to help the refugees who, want a better way of life and to be able to transition into German society. The Association of Public Libraries in Berlin is unique in that it's the first German library association that has provided library cards to refugees, minus the strict requirements of needing an official certificate of registration. That is something that's pretty much unheard of, so kudos to them for being able to accomplish that. Other German cities are now coming into play, and they're engaging in the process as well through guided tours and materials and offering special spaces. They're definitely engaged in this process. At the Sprachraum, as I said, I spent a lot of my time observing and participating in various conversation groups and programs and activities. There, they offer one-to-one German language instruction groups. They have gaming afternoons, and one of the ideas with the gaming is because even if you don't understand the language, you may still be able to enjoy playing games, and again, that sparks that camaraderie and assistance. Arts and crafts sessions, mentoring sessions for families and children. They even have open German help sessions, which is a weekly workshop that helps refugees learn anything from German vocabulary to filling in job applications to finding accommodations, better accommodations for living. New people are continually finding their way to the Sprachraum through way of the programs, learning about it at the programs at the Central Library and through word of mouth. Programs and resources that exist at the library outside of Sprachraum for refugee families include workshops that are targeted for parents and preschool teachers or child care providers. The topics that are covered in those workshops include the importance of reading aloud, identifying age-appropriate books, multilingualism among family members and within society and the importance of it, and also to increase motivation for multilingual education. It provides educator support through intercultural skill enhancement for teachers and educators, also through workshops whose topics include literacy, reading promotion, and the importance of intercultural education via the media resource kits that you see there on the right-hand side. It's composed of books and CDs, bilingual materials that talk about languages and religions. For example, how do children around the world live, and how do their customs differ? So that's an effort they're trying to reach everybody at the, primary levels as low as, as early as they possibly can to make it an easier process. They also have a monthly Fathers Read Aloud program where the librarians select books, and they talk to the fathers about the importance of reading aloud to their children and in multilingualism. For fathers, they spend time reading together. The Central Library Tours is something that I had the privilege of also participating in. They provide both connection and value for the refugees in terms of connecting with each other and sharing experiences and seeing the value of the information that is available at the library. The group that I participated in, there were 10 to 15 refugees. One library staff member who's not always a librarian leads the discussion. They meet together first as a group in the conference room, and they learn about the library cards, the library itself, and the rules and the policies for borrowing materials. Also, how to find the information that they need. When I was participating, what we did is we went around the room, everybody identified themselves, their country of origin, and then a favorite hobby. Now, the countries of origin who were represented when I was there were Angola, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, and Kurdistan, just to name a few. Wow. And sometimes they have a translator for Syrian translator, sometimes they don't, and they just kind of do the best they can. Now, as they identify their favorite hobbies, the leader is writing down the numbers of the library floors on a flip chart. And what she does is then she lists the hobbies alongside the number of the floor of the library where you can find this information, so that they're able to, again, make that connection and see the personal value in it. So then everyone in the group gets a free library card that's good for 3 months. And again, the library staff had to really work hard around existing policies and requirements to make this possible. As far as learning to read and speak in German, children's books are a good place to start because it's written in dual languages, both the native language and German. And the library there has materials in over 40 languages, especially in their children's collection. We have multilingual readings, which provide for cultural expansion. Excuse me. And this is where groups of teachers and parents and students all work together to make this happen. Children read aloud for other children and their parents in German and in their native language using bilingual books. So they may read one story and where they will actually read one paragraph in German and one paragraph in their native language. And then the next student will read one paragraph in German and read something in their language. So the children can hear a single story not only in German in their own language, but other languages as well. And again, the multilingualism and the reinforcement of the importance of that, exposing them at a very early age. Some of the best practices and takeaways from my experience, certainly community engagement, how important, how valuable that is, and you see that alive and well at Sprachraum. It's just amazing that they are coming together. The local government support was, of course, important and necessary for them to secure the space. Having a dedicated program space is always good, even though it's not always feasible for a lot of libraries to have that luxury. But fortunately, and they didn't either until they spotted this. So maybe keeping your eyes and ears open for another space in the community, perhaps. It's not connected to the library, but it can be used in that capacity. And of course, volunteer support, all walks of life, including migrants. Staff commitment, they have a can-do spirit there. The staff work really hard to make everybody welcome. It doesn't matter who you are, anybody who walks in the library is welcome to use it. Even if they do charge for library cards, they do have to pay for those, but they're still welcome to come in and use the library. They have targeted programming By that I mean language learning collections or CDs in a given language paired with booklets in the same language. And they also have language discussion groups where they gather into a circle, and it's led by a discussion leader, and they meet together weekly to practice their German language, and they may decide on a topic, and it's not mandatory for you to actually offer, but it's of course beneficial if you can. So participate in that. When I was there, we were able to share what favorite folktale from our particular country of origin, but when you described it, you had to do it in German. So, but I thought they all did great. Multilingualism, again, emphasizing the importance of still continuing to speak in your native tongue at home, but also learning the German language of your new home as well. And one of the teachers had approached one of the parents had asked one of the librarians, is it okay for them to still speak their native tongue at home, or should we encourage them to speak only in German when they're home? And they're saying, oh, by all means, have them speak in their native tongue, because it's important to have that heritage and to recognize that and keep that going. And finally, promotion, how important it is. As we all know in libraries, it's very important to get the word out, about what we do and all the fantastic programs and services that we have to offer. It's not really very helpful if we have these programs, but no one knows about them, and if they don't know about them, they can't participate and take advantage of them. So again, the importance of getting the word out, whether it's through library programs, social media, or word of mouth. Now Jessica is going to talk a little bit about the challenges and strategies that we face.
Yes. So during Mary Agnes's trip to Cologne, to the Cologne Public Library, we were actually in the process of thinking about new strategies for engagement for our immigrant communities here in Indianapolis. And so when she came back and we had the opportunity to talk about her experience, there were several things that she shared that were common practices or programs in Cologne that, while we had thought about them, we weren't sure, how do we do this, how would it work? But then listening or hearing from Mary Agnes about how they'd done some of that in Cologne actually proved to be very useful for us. And actually, there's a program that we recently implemented that looks very similar to the program in Cologne, Germany. So I think it's really important, before I kind of dive into what these two new projects are, is to talk a little bit about our challenges and what our traditional strategies have been. So these are challenges that are actually probably similar to most other libraries, large or small, in that we often encounter with some of our immigrant newcomer communities having to explain what a public library is and how they function. Are they safe places? And I think that sometimes we can have the potential maybe to take that for granted, because libraries often, in other countries, sometimes there's a government affiliation, the government is not trusted, they're primarily used for academic purposes, there's a cost connected to being able to use those, or they're completely non-existent. And if they're a refugee and they've come from a refugee camp, they could have been born in a refugee camp, that means they've had absolutely no experience with public libraries at all. And so then the question is, how do we work to build trust with those communities when their concepts of a public library is slim, if it exists at all? So how do we build intentional relationships of value if, one, we don't understand the cultural dynamics of those communities, and two, if we don't have the staff capacity to reach out to those communities? Because oftentimes we have limited representation among staff of those communities, and that we don't have staff who are bilingual and bicultural who are able to make those connections. And then I didn't put this in here, but also materials. Are these communities literate in their native language? Perhaps they can speak it, but they may not read and write it. Finding texts that are written in its original language is also a challenge. And so I think, I'm making an assumption, but I suspect that there are other libraries who also face some of these challenges in their libraries as well. So some of our traditional strategies have been to offer training opportunities for our staff. We've offered Spanish language classes for staff who say, I've had some Spanish, I would really like to hone in on that a little bit more. We've offered opportunities for staff to learn about how to communicate through an interpreter, especially if that interpreter is a child, which often happens, in reminding staff about how to do that if it's a child, and making sure you give the respect to the adult who you're speaking with, even though the child is serving as the interpreter. And then also, how do we communicate across cultures? Then, of course, we've tried to have signage and relevant materials made available to offer programs that would be of interest to the community, and not just programs that we think would be good, but actually getting feedback from the community about what they would like to see happen at the library. And then, more important than anything really for us, has been to develop long-standing relationships with our local communities, and that goes beyond just inviting them to participate in a single program or a series and then we don't talk to them again, but being intentional to make sure that we maintain those relationships so that they feel like the library is a place for them and that they have a vested interest in it. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a couple new engagement strategies. These literally started like a week ago. Wow. So they're very, very, very new. What we've done is to think about how do we improve access to information about the library and its resources and services. So we know a lot of libraries have a brochure that tells you how to get a card with basic information. But again, there's this issue that we cannot assume literacy. We cannot assume that individuals will be literate in their home language, and then we're also expecting them to understand what a fee is, what a due date is, when things need to be returned, what it means to borrow, what it means to pay a fee. And so being mindful that these are challenges for a lot of communities, we were like, okay, so how do we do this? And so the answer to this was actually to develop a series of videos in 9 languages. So there are 3 videos in each language. The first video is a general welcome to the library. It explains what a library is. As a matter of fact, it says, what is a public library? The public library is, and it goes on to give an explanation. The second video explains how you get a library card. What do you need? So we have a lot of really great partners. For example, the Mexican consulate here in Indianapolis sent us an image of the matrícula consular, which we accept as a form of ID, so that we could use that to show patrons, particularly those who are of Mexican descent, that you can use your consular ID card to get a library card. And then the third video is, of course, the rules and responsibilities and explains what a fee is. So with the assistance of our partner organizations, we created the series, we identified the languages, and that was based on partner and branch staff feedback. So for the school groups or the community organizations we were working with, what were the languages that they were noticing? From our staff, what were the languages they were noticing? And they couldn't help patrons. They wanted to make sure patrons had a better understanding of our services. And then based on that, we decided to go ahead and develop the video series in those languages, including English, because again, we should not assume literacy in English either. So just making our information resources a lot more accessible. But the world is constantly changing, and since these videos have been created, we have already identified 2 new languages that we really could incorporate here. And while we will not be able to put them into this video series, we've had the text and the content already translated, and we are right now in the process of thinking about how we make the information available through audio, so that if a patron comes in, then they can still get the information. They just can't see it. They'll be able to hear it. And for the 3 videos, if they run all together, they are no longer than 5 minutes for everyone to be able to access. So I thought it might be helpful, as long as the link is working, to just give you a quick look at the page. So we have these, every branch actually has a chapter DVD with all of the languages, but the site is very simple. And so staff can access it if they have a patron that's in the branch who wants to get a library card and may not understand. In fact, we've had some staff members who have already used it. We can make it available to our partner organizations, to our school groups who we work with. And you would click here and you can find your language. And we try to have it both in English and in the other language so that individuals will know where to go. Also on the site, we have information about programs that are offered at the library. This actually includes, we have computer classes that are offered in Spanish. We have English conversation circles, which actually were somewhat born out of information and programs that Mary Agnes learned about while in Cologne. And then, of course, we have links to many of our partner organizations here in Indianapolis for individuals who might be interested. Our newest project is actually a Global Village project, which is brand new also. And we received a 2-year grant thanks to our Public Library Foundation here in Indianapolis. And it really builds off of a long-standing relationship with a local organization here in Indianapolis called the Immigrant Welcome Center. The mission of the Immigrant Welcome Center is to empower immigrants by connecting them to the people, places, and resources that enable them to build successful lives and enrich the community. They function through a volunteer program called Natural Helpers. Natural Helpers are immigrants themselves who are able to help newcomer immigrants and refugees transition to life here in Indianapolis. So the Immigrant Welcome Center already has neighborhood branches around the city. They've done them at hospitals, they've done them at schools. So over the course of the next 2 years, we have identified 4 library locations that will serve as host sites. So the Immigrant Welcome Center will now have service hours inside of 4 library branches. So we are starting this year with 2 branch locations. Our Pike branch and our East Washington branch location will start this year. And our hope is to be able to better make some connections to some of our immigrant and refugee communities here in Indianapolis. So the project model is fairly simple. We identify 4 branch locations where we noticed we had service gaps, but the Immigrant Welcome Center also noticed that they had service gaps. So we said, okay, so what makes sense for us to focus on these 4 locations, and then the Immigrant Welcome Center decided which 2 locations made the most sense based on what the specific need is. So as a part of that, the Natural Helpers will be cross-trained on basic library services. So how to help people get a library card, how to help them find materials in the public library, helping them to access information about programs that would be available, and any other assistance that we would not particularly be able to do because we do not have the language ability. Our hope, what we've done is we target the languages in the communities based on where the branches are. We're doing a really intentional expansion of our world language collection over the next couple of years. One of the main things for us is coming up with a community engagement plan. And so each participating branch will identify a location in their community. It can be an apartment complex, it can be a grocery store, it doesn't matter, where they have said, you know what, we really have not done a great job making connections there. We would like to be able to do that. And so the Natural Helper will be able to, in partnership with the library staff, build a relationship there. So is it going to be monthly story times? Do we figure out how we can do a mobile program there so that you now have a Natural Helper who can help you with the language barrier, but you're also able to go and build a relationship or make a connection in an area where you perhaps otherwise would not have been able to do that. So as far as goals, 1, having a Natural Helper in the space really helps us to increase staff capacity because, at least for our library, it can be hard for branch staff to get away, to get outside of the building. And so having Natural Helpers there allows us to be able to do that. And yes, we do have some funding through our grant that allows us to pay a stipend so that we can have someone on staff for us. But we are going to be thinking about over the course of the next few years, how do we make this project sustainable, and our foundation is helping us to think that through. How do we improve access to library information resources? Creating intentional community engagement and outreach. We'd like to see more people, once we start to make these visits, we love to see more people coming into the library to take advantage of our resources. And then a mutual goal for us, for the Immigrant Welcome Center, and for anyone else who perhaps services newcomer communities, is that we would really like to make sure that we are equipping newcomers with the resources to ease their adjustment to life in Indianapolis. How can we make this easier for those communities, and how can we use the resources that we have as a library system in order to do that? And finally, I just think it's important we have grant funds, we have a fairly large library system, but I really feel like the last two projects that I've mentioned are really scalable depending on your library size and completely doable. Again, it's really about relationships and having connections to the right people in the community to help you do that. But be clear about your intention or your need. We cannot do it all. We're going to miss languages. But really just saying our goal is to be able to get into this space, to target this particular community, and really to try to be intentional. So be clear about your intention, identify the communities and languages where you feel like you have a significant gap, and then pinpoint who your partners are. Who do you have in the community that believes in the work of the library and believes in its value to the community? And then say, you know what, we would really love for you to come alongside us. Is there an organization who you say, we'd love for you to have service hours in our location and we can promote it? Are there individuals who speak the languages and you can say, we'll create the script. Would you mind doing a reading? Or perhaps you create a podcast or you create a YouTube video where you can share that information. Develop your plan and then use your resources in the community, the people who are your friends, and then figure out how you can execute that.
And just to recap real quick about the resources that we use to make this presentation possible. Of course, I already alluded to the assistance received by the Indianapolis and Cologne Sister Cities committees. Special shout out to Nicole James, the manager of Sultz Branch, for all of her hard work in being my personal translator and making it all flow smoothly and successfully. Of course, internal IndyPL support, couldn't be here without them. Support from our CEO, Jackie Nudis, who firmly believes in the importance of the professional exchanges and promoting it, staff engagement in that. Of course, Jessica and all the program team for their support, our Indianapolis Public Library Foundation for helping to fund my portion and much of a lot of the projects that are going forward. A couple of the links here that you see, the IndyPL launches projects to reach new immigrants is on our webpage, and it talks about the Immigrant Welcome Center branches and the conversation circles for people who would like to practice their English language better. Of course, a link to the Immigrant Welcome Center neighborhood branches. You can find out more about those and how they operate. And a couple of other resources. The Guardian article titled "Cologne Library Opens Its Doors to Refugees. You Fill This Room with Life" provided much of the information I gave about the Sprachraum itself. And this morning while I was looking for more information about Cologne, I did run across a DW article about the Cologne Public Library and how it redefines its role through the new refugee project. And I would highly recommend reading through that. It's very readable. It's also about the Sprachraum in general.
And so our sponsors, of course, we have to say thank you to our public library. Indianapolis Public Library Foundation has been a tremendous support for us in order to, for Mary Agnes's trip, the execution of the mobile branch locations, and also the development of the multilingual videos. And then our partners. Our videos are actually produced by WFYI here in Indianapolis. They worked very closely with us. They understood the concept of getting information to the community. So it was not a hard sell. They got it, and they worked with us very closely to make sure that we could execute this the best way possible. The International Center provided competency training for Mary Agnes about how to function in a German business environment so that she was equipped with what she needed before she got there. Then, of course, the Immigrant Welcome Center and the Burmese American Community Institute here in Indianapolis, they were also a tremendous support in helping us to get have the videos produced.
And before we proceed with questions, I just have one more shout out, which I neglected to mention, and last of all but not least, to my awesome Eagle Branch Library staff for keeping the boat afloat in my absence. It made it much easier for me to be gone, and knowing that they were carrying on in my absence and doing a fine job of it. So thanks, guys. Now we're ready for questions.
Okay, so at this time, we do have time for questions. Does anyone have any questions for either Mary Agnes or Jessica or both? Monica Casanova, she had a question, or rather request. She wanted to know, can you send the link to the videos
Yes.
that you were talking about?
Yes, I'll send a link.
Okay. Any other questions? Looks like we've got a lot of thank yous. Oh, let's see. Hope McCune wants to know, will the IndyPL system have library card applications in different languages?
We're talking about that right now. The plan is to have some, but again, it goes back to this assumption that people will be able to read in their native language, but we still want to have the resource available. So yes, we are likely to have that. We're talking now about, do we want to print several of those, or do we want to have digital applications available online that we can just make easily accessible that people can print out? So that is a real possibility. We already have them in Spanish, but we're deciding now whether or not we should do them in other languages or how we want to make those available.
I just had a couple questions, and this was the start of your presentation in the building block section, and you had how to engage staff. How did you do that? How did you get staff buy-in? Because that's a lot of work.
I think I would say that it was really a priority for our CEO. Mm-hmm. She set it as a priority in the very beginning, and really did a big push to get staff on board, mm-hmm. In terms of making it a priority. And we had already been in the process of doing a number of programs that were geared at working with immigrants. Mm-hmm. We did a series called Journey, and we did one Journey through Africa. We did Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. And what we did was we created a coalition, or a committee, if you will, of representatives from the communities of those regions, mm-hmm. and we developed a program series that went on for 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. Then branch staff had an opportunity to pick up some of those programs, and so we had already been doing that over the course of several years. So I think that really kind of helped. Mm-hmm. So they understood the concept of how do we better engage with our communities and how we do that. And then when Jackie came on and said, you know, we have these sister city relationships and this is what we're going to be doing, we expanded the programming, specifically focused on sister cities that way as well. And so I think that really kind of helped to get staff on board. We've done some competency training sessions and really have allowed staff to give some feedback and ask questions and things like that.
And I know at Eagle, just because we, Hope McCune is one of our staff who is great with helping the Spanish speakers. She helps a lot, and they do go to her for a resource. But we just see the need. I think we see every day to day our desire to want to help everybody who comes through the doors, and so that helps build staff because we, you know, it's just our desire to help.
Cool. So you mentioned, Mary Agnes, about the library in Cologne, that they were basically in city centers. Do you know, how are they funded? Or do you know, does the city fund the libraries? Yes. Similar to how our public libraries are funded, or is it a little bit similar but different?
Probably similar in that there is a city connection, mm-hmm. but they are part of the Ministry of Culture, so they are run by the city, and they observe city hours. For example, if museums and other cultural institutions are closed on Mondays, mm-hmm. it follows that the library is closed on Mondays. Okay. And Sundays as well, for that matter. But they, let's see what else. Oh, for example, even the branch schedules, the library staff schedules, mm-hmm. is handled by a city employee who does the scheduling for all the branches in Central as well. So the manager will receive an email every morning. They check to mm-hmm. see who's where, who's sick, who's on vacation, and then the expectation is that staff will float around and fill those vacancies. So it wasn't uncommon for me, even though I only toured 4 branches mm-hmm. and was at Central, I saw several familiar faces at mm-hmm. various locations pinch hitting. Because as I mentioned, they only have 4, and if mm-hmm. someone's out, boy, that puts quite a strain on their on their services. Does that answer your question? Yeah.